The wind came down from the high hills, carrying dust that shimmered like gold in the dying light. The world was painted in long shadows and rust, and the ranch seemed to breathe in rhythm with the land. Eli Carson stood by the corral fence, his hands rough and scarred from years of work. His hat shaded his eyes, but he could see everything: the cattle grazing in the distance, the barn's old board swaying in the breeze, the faint outline of mountains against a bleeding sky. Evening was when he felt most at peace. The work was done, the silence honest, the ghosts quiet for a while. But tonight, the silence broke. He heard it, the creak of the front gate, slow and deliberate, as though whoever opened it was afraid to be heard. Eli turned, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver. The figure stepping through the gate wasn't what he expected. A woman, covered in trail dust, her coat frayed at the edges, boots caked with mud from miles of hard travel. Her hat was pulled low, shadowing her face, but he caught the glint of eyes watching him, cautious, sharp, and tired. "Evenin'," he said after a moment, his voice low and gravelly. "You lost." She hesitated before answering, her hand tightening around the strap of a small leather satchel slung across her shoulder. "No, just need a place to stay. Maybe work, if you've got any." Eli frowned, studying her. A lone woman riding this far into open country wasn't common, not unless she was running from something, or someone. There was a tremor in her stance, not fear exactly, but the kind of exhaustion that runs deeper than the body. "What kind of work you thinkin' of?" "Whatever you need done," she said. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend horses. I'll work for food and a roof. Just until I can move on." Her words were steady, but her eyes flickered away when she spoke, like she was hiding something behind that calm tone. Eli rubbed his jaw, thinking. He'd been alone for a long time, and he'd learned not to let strangers too close. Still, something about her presence, the way she stood proud despite the dirt, the way her voice fought not to break, made him hesitate to turn her away. He finally nodded toward the barn. "You can bed down in the hayloft for the night. We'll see about work in the mornin'. There's water in the trough and stew on the stove, if you're hungry." The woman looked at him, as though unsure whether to trust his words. Then she gave a small nod. "Thank you." Her voice softened, almost breaking. "I won't be any trouble." He said nothing, only tipped his hat slightly before turning back toward the fence. As she passed by him, he caught sight of a faint limp in her right leg. He pretended not to notice. Night fell fast. The storm clouds that had been building all day began to smother the stars. The wind grew colder, sharper. Eli stepped into the barn a while later to check on the horses, the lantern light throwing long shadows across the stalls. That's when he saw her again. She sat near the corner on a pile of hay, her coat folded beside her, her sleeve rolled up. Her hand trembled as she peeled away a strip of dirty cloth wrapped around her arm. Her breathing hitched, and she muttered something under her breath. Eli stopped, careful not to startle her. But before he could speak, she turned, sensing his presence. "Wait," she said softly, almost pleading. "I take it off." He froze. The words hung strangely in the air, heavy and unsure. Then she pulled away the last of the cloth, and Eli saw it, the dark, raw brand burned into her flesh, an ugly, scorched deep and fresh. His gut tightened. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the lantern light revealing the edges of pain still seared in her skin. "Who did that to you?" His voice came quiet, but hard as steel. Her eyes lifted to his, gray and glistening with unshed tears. "Roth," she whispered. "From Red Creek Ranch." Eli's jaw tightened. He knew the name. Everyone did. Roth was the kind of man who called cruelty business and violence a warning. Eli had dealt with him once, long ago, and it was a mistake that still sat bitter in his memory. She looked away, her voice shaking. "He branded me like one of his cattle. Said it'd remind me who I belong to. I ran 3 nights ago. Haven't stopped since." The barn fell into silence. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off. The horses shifted nervously in their stalls. Eli's eyes didn't leave hers. "You're safe here," he said at last. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you again. Not while I'm standin'." Something in her expression cracked, a flicker of disbelief, a fragile hope. She lowered her gaze, and her lips trembled as she whispered, "You don't even know me." Eli looked at her, the brand still burning in his mind. "I don't need to," he said simply. The wind howled through the cracks in the barn door, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of change. And for the first time in a long while, Eli felt something stir in his chest, not anger, not loneliness, but purpose. The kind that comes when a man decides to stand between what's right and what's been wrong for too long. He lifted the lantern, letting its warm light fill the dark. The woman looked up, her face half in shadow, half in glow, as if caught between two worlds. And in that moment, under the storm's gathering roar, both of them knew nothing would ever be the same again. By the time dawn pushed its first pale light over the horizon, the world outside had turned to gray. A storm was brewing, the kind that rolled in fast across the open plains, where thunder could be heard long before the rain came. Eli Carson stood by the hitching post, tightening the saddle on his bay gelding. His movements were steady but tense, his mind replaying the woman's words from the night before. Roth, Red Creek Ranch, branded like cattle. The thought burned as fierce as the brand itself. When the barn door creaked open, Eli looked up. She stepped out quietly, his old coat draped around her shoulders. It was too big for her, but she didn't complain. Her eyes were still rimmed with exhaustion, yet something in her had changed. She looked stronger, steadier, like a person preparing to face the world again, even if it scared her. "You should rest," Eli said, tightening the reins. "Storm's comin', wind'll make travel hard." She shook her head. "If Roth finds out where I am, he won't stop." "He doesn't stop." Eli turned to face her fully. "You're not riding out alone. I'll take you into town. There's a marshal there who owes me a favor. He'll keep you safe." For a long moment, she said nothing. The rain began to spit against the dirt, light but cold. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Eli's eyes softened. "Because once, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. I reckon I owe the world a favor." Before she could respond, the wind shifted, carrying with it something sharp and unmistakable. Hoofbeats, distant, but closing fast. Eli's head snapped toward the ridge. 3 riders, moving like a storm front, dark against the pale horizon. His stomach dropped. He didn't need to ask who it was. She saw it too, her breath catching in her throat. "Roth," she whispered. Eli's voice hardened. "Get inside the barn, now." She hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes, but one look at his face told her not to argue. She darted inside, ducking behind the stalls as Eli unhooked his shotgun from the saddle. The riders came fast, their horses churning up mud as the first real drops of rain began to fall. By the time they reached the yard, thunder was rolling above them like cannon fire. Roth rode at the front, tall, broad, dressed in black from boots to hat. His grin was a twisted thing, smug and cruel. "Well," he drawled, dismounting with practiced ease, "I'll be damned. Eli Carson, playin' hero these days." Eli stood in the open, the shotgun resting against his shoulder, eyes cold and steady. "You're trespassing, Roth. Turn around and leave." Roth laughed, motioning toward the barn. "You've got something that belongs to me. A little runaway who forgot her place." "She's not yours," Eli said flatly. "She's a person, not a brand." Roth's smirk faded, replaced by something darker. "You think you can stand between me and what's mine?" Lightning split the sky, white and violent. In that flash, Roth drew his revolver. But Eli was faster. The shotgun roared once, echoing like thunder across the plains. Roth stumbled backward, the gun falling from his hand, his black hat flying into the mud. He hit the ground hard, his eyes wide with shock. The other 2 riders froze, staring at their fallen boss. Eli didn't lower his weapon. "Take him," he said, voice like steel. "And tell anyone who'll listen, Red Creek's reign is over. This land ain't ruled by fear no more." Neither man argued. They lifted Roth's limp body onto one of the horses and rode out into the storm, disappearing into the sheets of rain that now poured down across the open range. Eli stood there for a long time, rain running down his face, mixing with sweat and dust. The thunder softened into distant grumbles. When he finally turned toward the barn, she was standing in the doorway, her eyes wide and glassy. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, stepping out into the rain. "Yeah," he murmured, setting the shotgun down. "I did." She took a shaky breath. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she whispered. "He took my name, my freedom, everything." Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out the strip of torn cloth she'd used to bind her arm. He handed it to her. "Then start over. Right here. Call yourself whatever you want. You're free now." She stared at the cloth, then wrapped it gently around her arm again, not to hide the mark, but to remind herself that she'd survived it. A symbol not of pain, but of defiance. The rain kept falling, softening the earth beneath their boots, washing away the blood and the fear. Eli took off his hat, letting the cold water run through his hair. For the first time in years, he felt the tightness in his chest ease. She looked up at him through the rain, a faint, trembling smile crossing her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli nodded. "You're safe here. You got a place for as long as you need it." They stood together under the dark sky, two souls scarred by the same cruel land, finding something neither had expected, not rescue, not redemption, but hope. The storm rolled on above them, but beneath it, a new calm settled over the ranch. For the first time in a long while, the Wild West didn't feel quite so wild. It felt like a beginning.